Hey everybody, DayTraderRockStar here, and it's the high probability watch list for the week of August 21st, I believe. Yes, I am doing the watch list from Oregon, so it's going to sound a little bit different, and I'll be back on Tuesday. Full coverage of the market. I'm going to give a big shout out to RPM for covering for me as I'm out on a little vacation with my family out here. But it's kind of a working vacation because I'm in the room today. It's a Friday, and I'm just trading with everyone and just doing the video here and doing some research. So I'd like to get this out today for you, and see you early next week. The interesting thing was I was out of internet connection the last couple of days. I was over Crater Lake National Park camping, so there was absolutely no coverage. And I come back and I see there was another terrorist event and some other news that really dropped the market yesterday. So coming into today, we were looking at the S&P cash as we broke down through some actually major trend lines, and this all started with a divergence. So right before I left on this little vacation, we actually had a sell divergence signal. So we actually started taking the VIX, and actually before we went on vacation, we've been trading the S&P to the downside with some puts and stuff, and that all worked out great. We had a little bounce, but the setup here continues to look bearish as we started to turn back over. And again, this circle right here, I'm going to put the circle in here. This big candle here, in reaction to news, is something that we always talk about. It says everything works great until there's news that comes out and it can affect charts. So everything was working out really well, and then you had some news, and now we finally broke down through that trend line. If I zoom out here a little, you can see that trend line goes up. A minor trend line, and we have a major trend line underneath us we haven't gotten down to. So it's kind of it's a decent enough trend line, or I'll say it's important enough to watch it, and I think we're actually going to get a little bit more downside on this, and that might be happening today a little. As you can see, we did pull back a little bit further today, a little candle starting off, and we have what we call a lower high on stochastic rotation. So we have a high here and a lower high here, so you can actually start to see a downward trend starting to form. And I'm actually working with limited. I'm actually going to do fine with this setup right here. I got my laptop, I got an office computer out here, but I don't have. You can hear the show in the background. So we have this downward channel, and we might even possibly have a divergence set up to the upside. We're going to see how the day ends and how next week starts. But I'm starting to feel just a little anxiety in the market. A little anxiety in the market, which comes, I guess, with experience. And it's hard to call that because this market has been a buy-to-dip market. It has been buy-to-dip market going into the last few years. I mean, we did have a couple pullbacks. 2015 to 2016, it was kind of a sloppy sideways year. And 2016 here pretty much grinded up until the end of the year, and then we moved sideways, and then we actually busted out in 2017. It's been very strong. Turn down that news a little so we could actually get a better feel of it. So like I said, we have a situation where we have a bigger downward channel with a lower high and a bigger channel, and we actually have a possible divergence setup going into a Friday and going into next week. The volatility came into the market should be a little bit interesting, more traders getting involved. We'll take a look at that 60-minute time frame. And here's a good picture of it. We have what we call a classic 1-2-3 channel. We have two big pivots on the top. One really defines the top of the move in the market right here, and actually there's that divergence. And the bottom one here, we're just going to drop a parallel trend line here underneath us, and pretty much came right in perfectly in line there. And that typically is a good buy signal. It's what we call a 1-2-3 channel HPS technique. two pivot areas on top, one on the bottom. The one on the bottom we just extend out as a parallel trend line, and you watch that trend line, in this case a channel line, for a reaction.
Red, the lines are oversold.
And that's where we are getting that bounce right now with a 60-minute oversold level. So this is also kind of good. So we will have some activity here. It might move up a little. Might by the end of the day drop off. There is some new terrorist activities happening. It's things are on edge. So I definitely have a little cautious outlook going into next week. And I definitely, last week I picked up some VIX going out to October. And I want to start off showing that VIX setup. Now the VIX is, the volatility futures, well, right now the VXX, the ETF that trades off the VIX, is the one I'm using on this. But the VIX really measures the volatility in the market, the VIX. And we usually see that as a pretty decent indicator when volatility, or we should say fear, comes into the market. Fear is a good fear index. And whenever we have an event, we usually get a pop in the VIX. And yesterday, as you can see, we had this for the last couple days. This is the daily chart. Yesterday we had a big pop in the VIX. And last week we had a pop in the VIX. So this is where we are right now. We haven't really extended off of that, but in some cases you do get a nice little run in the VIX, nice little run in the VIX, a nice little run in the VIX. A lot of people will say the best trade here is to short that. Anytime you get a short top in or a pop in the VIX, just to short it, and eventually it will come back down and settle back down. And that has been the case. I mean, if you look back out here, this is a self-decaying, product that is just sometimes very hard to catch a bounce on it. Now this is the VIX overall, so this is a little bit different. But we're talking about the VXX, and this is going to see a different chart altogether. Look at this thing. Sometimes very hard to trade on the upside. Look at this thing. It decays down, it rebalances, it loses value over time, but every so often when we have some type of event, it will pop, and that's why it's good for protection into events. We're seeing some activity here in the VIX. It's interesting. I think it's worth a hedge. A hedge means if you like the market going one direction, but you want to protect yourself in case it goes the other direction. In this case, I like the market longer, but because some of the events that are happening and the weakness that's starting to show up in the market, I like to have some VIX to protect those longs. So even if those longs kind of get affected short term by an event, the VIX will spike up and take some of that and equal out some of that damage. I'll make money on the VIX. So right now I'm holding some VIX calls. Now remember, calls here are based on long. The VIX here is an inverse of the market. So when the market usually goes down, the VIX goes up. Going back onto our bigger picture here, again, you can see a decent enough channel line. We're rolling over. I'm going to go back to that 5-minute chart right now. Now this is the chart we're working with right now. And if you're trading the markets on a daily basis and in the room with everyone trading, you'll notice that we concentrate on a 5-minute time frame. When we get a fast rotation, I'm going to actually show you the rotation up here. This is a very nice example of a negative price divergence. Here you have your stochastic oscillator rotating back up into an overbought level, but we're really just going sideways on the price. So this gives us a better chance of actually getting overbought and then rotating back down, and this is because it hasn't even gotten a bounce, will continue to flush down. So this is an excellent little signal that we are going to head lower. So with that also said, I would say take cautious to anything on the upside. If you're long, and I'm going to go over the next part of the video, I'm going to go over some of the setups we have long, but I would say, this is probably a good idea. If you're unsure what's going on, is to clear out, kind of go flat going forward. Even if you do have some losses, is to kind of flatten out here or get some protection that protects your longs, and that way you kind of counterbalance things until things start to even out, and you kind of steady out in the geopolitical events that are happening. Because right now we're seeing this. This is a great indicator. This sideways consolidation on the price, the move up here, and this is a short-term time frame. This is a 5-minute time frame. So this is not, I'm not planning out the next 4 or 5 days, but I'm planning out the next, maybe the next hour or two in the market right now, which shows us there's a great possibility that we're going to continue to move lower, and that momentum will, maybe, possibly, cause an effect that we break down out of this channel and we capitulate down to the next level down here, which is quite a few, a few points below us. So I definitely am a little bit more cautious and would advise either protection or, kind of flattening up a little and just kind of letting this play out until we get into another rotation or another good setup. I pride myself on finding us the best setups out there, but every so often we're going to get hit with news or the market will pull back and will break down through some important patterns. Those are the times you have to kind of wade through, because lots of the other times you're making your money, but there will be a time when something looks like a perfect opportunity here. It looks like a nice 1, 2, 3 pattern, but we're seeing some other indications that say, hey, even though we have a nice pattern here, it doesn't mean that we're always going to bounce there. Sometimes we can break down on certain occasions, and this could be one of those occasions, so be very cautious. I'm going to go over the HPS watch list that's currently active, because most of the stocks are currently active, and I am trying to do some research here, but I have limited hardware here to really get some good scans and stuff. I'm doing my scans and stuff, but we have so many good setups going into next week that are still active. I'm going to concentrate on those. We'll see how they're looking over the last week and how they set up, and see if they're also showing some weakness. And we'll start off with that right now.